Fireside Tales. Hello, I'm Merlin, Mililli. Welcome to my fireside, where I tell weird tales within tales. And my cats mew at us, and Bear gets in on the action as much as possible as well. That's my dog. He's itchy, pardon him. And we drink coffee. Yeah. We don't call him Squeaky for nothing. I drink coffee from my skull mug every week here at Fireside Tales, because every week here at Fireside Tales, I also tell the story of the Grateful Dead, because I'm a deadhead, and it's a story about reincarnation. And here at Fireside Tales, we talk about reincarnation. So, I'm just going to go ahead and get a tissue, because right now my nose is running again. And last time I did this, I didn't get a tissue, and I expected it just to stop, and it didn't. So I have a tissue so that now it will stop. It's actually a napkin, but it will be fine. So, like I said, I'm a deadhead. And I was told the story of the Grateful Dead by a deadhead, by a fire, as it should be told. So every week here at the Fireside Tales, we've discussed reincarnation, and I discuss meditation, and I discuss a meditative library. This meditative library is it's like a metaphysical place. It's not really a place, and you reach it through meditation, and it's called the Akasha, or the Akashic Records. Other people have noticed this place before. It's not just me. I didn't just make it up. It's an ancient library. Mary K. Greer has written about it. Bunch of other authors that write like about tarot and metaphysical things that have written about it as well. In the Akasha, every soul has a book. And my book is big and old and dusty. And I go to the Akasha with my spirit guides. I did a guided meditation actually on this show to meet your spirit guides. So check that one out. I'm not sure which episode that is. Pull it out of the episode or do it again or something separately. So in my book is recorded every life I've lived. One of the reasons I'm making this show is because I don't think we understand reincarnation very well on the whole as humanity. I think we could understand it better, and I think I understand it pretty good. The reason being because my book is so thick. I don't think everybody's book is as thick as mine, and something I found, well, I found a lot of things to connect each life to the next. Things about each life in my book that are the same. One of those things is that in every life I seem to have been a psychic medium. That said, I had the ability to talk to spirits. I still have that ability. And the spirits say that reincarnation happens when someone's been murdered and they get a chance to come back again. So if that is true, and I haven't been able to prove it untrue, so if that is true, I have been murdered a lot. And I know for sure a good portion of my lives did end in murder. There are some of them that I was a little unclear about, but now I'm starting to think, oh, and the more I look into different lives and see if they were murder, the more I find they very well might have been. Except, you know, people try to cover up murder, so it gets a little dicey in the aftermath. But there's no statute of limitations on murder. So, anyway, I discuss reincarnation here a lot, and I also discuss these threads, and one of these threads is fires and fire safety. Fire safety is very important, especially these days with global warming and everything catching fire. Even though we just got a bunch of snow here on Mount Shasta, November 3rd. I wasn't really prepared for snow yet, but we got some, and we still need to be safe about our fires. I have water in the kettle on top of the fire, and I have water in my cauldron here, and I have my sprayer around the corner. If you're having an outdoor fire, you should make sure your fire pit is dug in and lined with stones, and there's no grasses in there, and make sure there's no hanging branches overhead or any that will grow in there, because, you know, you could leave your fire pit for a while and other people could use it later down the road if it's nice. Make sure you put it in a place where branches aren't going to grow into its fire. Well away from the trees. And so then you want to have a bucket of water and a bucket of sand and a shovel so that you can put that thing out. If you have access to like a hose, that's great. But if you don't, you should have a bucket of water, a bucket of sand, and a shovel. So this is dried sage. They call this all bundled together a smudge stick. Fires and sage are two of my threads. I've been doing this by the fire for centuries, thousands of years, actually. We'll get into that in a bit. So you want to smudge your aura. That's what I just did. That's what that's called, smudging your aura, and it cleanses your aura. I feel cleaner. It cleanses your aura of that negativity that other people stick to you sometimes, that you get from being out and about or watching the news. Sometimes you can get like a weird sticky thing. Anyway, so yeah, I just mentioned the news. I have to smudge again. I also took off my shoes and I'm gonna ground. Grounding is also another one of my threads. So grounding is when you push all the air, all the excuse me, all the negativity out with air, with your air. Blow it out. All of it. And then you breathe in positivity. Think an uber positive thought. And you blow out positive energy. So smudging and grounding, I do both before I do any kind of divination work, like tarot, or I read runes also. And I also do the smudging and the grounding before any meditative work I do, before any sort of ritual. So it just cleanses your aura. And then if you're doing like a reading or a meditation, you're going to get the most positive results possible after you get yourself in the most positive frame of mind possible. It's the thought behind it. So it's been going on for a very, very, very long time. Fires, smudging, grounding, all of them. Thousands of years. So I'm going to put my shoes back on for sound effects because they're good for sound effects. And I'm going to tell you the story of the Grateful Dead. As I heard it from a deadhead by a fire. Once, long, long ago, there was a traveler. It was so long ago that she traveled by foot. And one day, while she was traveling, she happened upon a village. From her vantage point, she could see there was a crowd gathered in the village and some sort of commotion. So she got closer. And she noticed that the people of the village were squabbling over a dead body. The traveler thought this was disrespectful. Apparently they were arguing over the dead man's debts and who was going to pay them. They were arguing over who was going to bury him and who was going to pay for that. And so the traveler, thinking this was all just atrocious, paid the dead man's debts and paid for a proper burial and prayed over his grave. And then she traveled on. And then one day, decades later, she happened upon a life or death situation. The traveler from the very beginning. And out of nowhere, this stranger just scoops her up and saves her life. Traveler says, "Thank you. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why did you save my life?" And the stranger simply says, "I am the Grateful Dead." It's a story about reincarnation. It's an old Buddhist story. The Grateful Dead, the band, got the name from a Funk and Wagnall's dictionary, describing the stories in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And Buddhists are believers in reincarnation. And it's a Buddhist story. And it's not, it can't be a corpse at the end. Some people think it's a corpse at the end. But that's silly, because corpses don't save lives. Some people think it's a zombie. Zombies don't save lives either. It's a reincarnated person. It's that dead man that the traveler paid the debts for, and he's grateful. He's reborn again in a new little baby body, grown up decades later, saves her life because he's grateful. And no longer dead. Obviously, a dead person can't save a life, but if they're reincarnated, they can. So, in my book, there's a watermark. And before the watermark, everything is light and dry and sandy. And after the watermark, everything is wet and muddy and dark. I think it marks the Great Flood. And it seems to mark when time changed from BC to AD. This is supposed to AD be recorded time, right? But I think we had recorded history prior, seriously prior to when we started writing this stuff down. And I think the Great Flood wiped it all out. And I mean, we can't even get anything together just to save our planet from destruction. Never mind, you know, all at the same time decide to write stuff down. It just seems fishy to me. It always seemed fishy to me. It's all around the life and death of Christ. I don't really think so. I think he may have lived through the Great Flood. But I think it marks the Great Flood. And so does our recorded history versus not recorded history. So I mentioned that meditation was one of my threads, and stargazing is also one of my threads. And Little Flower was a really big stargazer, and so is all of her family. And this season we've been discussing Little Flower. Little Flower lived 10,000 years ago. And she lived for thousands of years. Now, the weird thing about my watermark is that all my lives before the watermark are really long, like thousands of years. And then after the watermark, they get normal. Quite short, actually. Most of my lives after the watermark, I don't really make it out of my 20s. So, Little Flower, being at the beginning of the book in the light dry section, apparently lived for thousands of years. And there's other documentation of this as well. There's the King's List. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a couple different languages carved in the stone. It's called the King's List. And there's this point at which all the kings live for thousands of years, and then they stop doing that at just one point on the stone, right there. It's weird. So, last season, I discussed all of my lives in my book in the Akashic Records. And this season, I am just talking about Little Flower, my very first life in my book. Last week, I discussed what we know, or the history of the place. Where she lived, I believe, was Machu Picchu in Peru. And his story of the area says that this area is Incan. And I talked about that last week. And I don't think, well, I think her story is quite a bit different from his story. I've told you before on other episodes that Little Flower was a Mayan, and I still believe she was. Machu Picchu is divided into two halves, and then there's like this avenue kind of in between. Some people think it was like a ball court or a road, but I don't remember the road. I don't remember the other half. I remember the half with the steps. And I think that's the only half we used as ancient Mayans there in Peru. And the way I see this all going down is what happened was, well, history recorded in the 1400s this Incan king. Okay, he was also, according to some records, a tyrant. So he was a tyrant king and he was exiled. Some people say he was, this was his, Machu Picchu was his pleasure palace. It may have become that, but originally it was where he was exiled to. Okay, and tyrant kings, well, tyrants lie. It's just sort of their nature, right? So what I see happening is that the king arrived there looking for a place to be because he'd been exiled, and this place was already kind of half built for him, right? So there's no one around to dispute that he did this all by himself. He'd wait a little while and fart around there and then tell everyone that he did it. He built it all. Only he didn't. Because I know that I helped carve those steps in my soul, but also in my book. Now, in my book, when I say I remember from my book, it's sort of, I don't really read it like you would read a regular book. I go to a section in my book and I touch it and I have a memory. And this is all meditative, so I'm not actually touching anything. I'm just meditating that I'm touching a section of my book, and I have a memory of that part of my soul's lives. And I remember these steps. I dream about them still. And because we lived for thousands of years, the old folks had different duties. They couldn't do the work. So this was 10,000 years ago, before child labor laws, before schools, before all of that. And they made note that the young people were spry and incapable of, they were capable of doing hard labor. So they set them to hard labor. And I remember being like a 12-year-old kid with this big rock carving those steps. I just remember. It's not something you forget. And obviously the earth didn't forget it. I haven't forgotten. Now, somehow, according to, I don't know who exactly, National Geographic, I guess, these ruins were found in 1450 something. So by the Incan king. So we don't know how old any of it is, but I know in my soul, excuse me, how old it is, and it's very, very old. We also had a turquoise mine there, and we mined some of the first turquoise. We probably took it all out, so it probably isn't there anymore. But we made the ancient Mayan calendars. So I still dream about those steps. I know them all too well to not have carved them. And there's nothing like that anywhere on the planet. We didn't realize, because it was so early in humanity, that there was anyone else or anywhere else on the planet. So we made the best of what we had there. And we lived there for thousands of years. And we carved those steps to grow food because, you can't plant a seed on a mountain that's pitched like this. It just rolls down. You have to carve a step so you could plant the seed. We grew food. We didn't grow the same food that the Incans apparently grew there, though. We grew, I remember, like a squash kind of vegetable and fruit, and I think they were like plums, and some sort of grain. We had like a grain, and you know, we lived. We had to eat something. We fed ourselves pretty well. And, you know, they say that there wasn't, you know, the steppes didn't provide enough food for the whole Incan village. Well, it didn't, because it wasn't meant to. The steppes were meant to feed about 50 people. And that's all we had there, tops. And they did. And that's proof in and of itself that that Incan king built that other half. Because the steppes don't provide enough food for both halves. Just the one where the steppes are. Funny how that is. So it's amazing, though, that the steppes were built by essentially children. We were all like 12. There were probably, you know, 25 of us out there carving those steppes, but we were all like 12. I remember us all being kids, just kids. So, every week here at Fireside Tales, I've been singing my song Before, which I wrote about reincarnation. So, I'm going to go ahead and sing that for you now. I'll keep discussing Little Flower for the rest of the season, so we'll talk about where they went and what happened to her tribe. Bear doesn't want us to, but we will anyway. Somebody stabbed me in the back, and now I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. But I lack memory of who I was. I must look back. I lack memory of who I was before. I'd been before, who I was when I was where I was before, I opened the door to find it there. No more, no more, no more. Before, before, before. Warm. Was able to outsmart Murphy and his silly little law. I got a tissue and then my nose stopped running. But now I'm sweaty. That made me sweaty. So this week I put out my 19th album. I have to say it's my favorite album so far. It just took me 19 tries to finally impress myself. I guess I'm hard to impress. But it's called Sound View, and it's available at merlinmililli.com. That's Merlin, like the wizard. Mililli, all one word, no space. MILLILLI.com. merlinmililli.com. I also put out Potty Mouth on October 1st. This is 2022 for now. So look for those things. Bear's not commenting on the album. He's commenting on Squeaky. So I think it's just going to be $1 to download. Right now I have 2 singles, Angels and On My Mind, from the album, available for free on YouTube if you'd like to check that out. It's under Soundview Singles. It's a playlist on my playlists. I have hundreds of playlists. Anyhow, that's so that's out. So check that out. And Potty Mouth is out. That came out October 1st. So that's pretty much it for me for this year as far as albums go. And that's pretty much it for me for this episode of Fireside Tales. Have a weird and wonderful weekend. Thanks for starting it by my fireside. A Mililli Studios production.